Now we will look at the performance testing life cycle. We have enough basics right now so that we can get into this performance testing life cycle and understand the various stages of it. Well, any testing as a life cycle. Let's say you're doing your manual testing or your functional testing. It has its own life cycle, which is what we call it as STLC, software testing life cycle. Let's say you're doing a security testing. It has its own life cycle, which is what we call it as security testing life cycle. Similarly, our performance testing has its own life cycle. Let's look at the different stages, the people who are involved during these different stages, and what kind of work that will be done during these different stages. Let's try to understand that. So the first stage of performance testing life cycle is NFR gathering and analysis phase. Earlier, we have already understood what is a NFR. NFR is non-functional requirement gathering. Any testing starts with requirement gathering. So is this non-functional testing. So during this testing, usually a test manager will be involved or a test lead will be involved. They will be actively talking to the end client. Whoever is the representative from the end client, it could be a business system analyst or a business analyst or a performance test manager, whoever it is. They will be talking to that representative, trying to understand the project and will try to gather all the NFRs required. So once the NFRs have been required or gathered, they will be doing the further analysis as to what is this NFRs, how we going to go ahead and use this NFRs and then make use of that in our projects. And then finally they will create a document for all the NFRs gathered, and we call that as a test requirement document. So once this test requirement document has been created and signed off by the client, it will be baselined. When I said baseline, there won't be any more changes that can be done to this particular document. This is when we call a particular document as a baseline document. So once this is baseline, we can say that this particular stage is done. Now the next stage will start, which is the test strategy or the test planning stage. Some of the people would like to call this stage as a test strategy stage. Some of the people would like to call this as a test planning stage or test planning phase. So for this stage to start, what is the document that is important for us? The test requirement document, which was baseline in my earlier phase or in my earlier stage. We make use of that document, then we can start our test planning. Who is typically involved in this stage? A test lead or a test manager. Usually a test lead will play a very important role in this particular stage. So what is he doing in this stage? He is planning as to how I'm going to do this performance testing. By what time I'll be getting done with this test planning, by what time I'll be done with this stage, I'll be done at what time I'll be done with the test execution stage. All this will be planned. Along with that, he will also plan what are the transactions that I'm going to use for this particular project. What are the things which are in scope? What are the transactions which are out of scope? All this will be analyzed and put it in a particular document, which is what we call it as a test plan document. Not only this, the things like what is the tool that we're going to use for this project, and who is responsible for which stage, how many scripts will be created, and what kind of test will be executed during this execution phase. What kind of test, like load test or stress test or endurance test or all of them, all that will be analyzed and planned during this phase. So during this phase is very important phase. Again, the test lead will be driving this particular phase. And what is the outcome of this particular stage? The test plan document. everything which has been analyzed, everything which will be planned by the test lead, he cannot keep it in his mind. He has to put that in a particular document, and this document need to be sent to the client again to make sure that they read the document, they like your planning, and once they like the planning, they will give a sign off. Once they give a sign off, what that means is they are happy with your planning and they are asking you to go ahead and start your actual testing. So once it is signed off, again this document will be baselined as well, which means that there won't be any more changes to this document. Once this document has been baselined, this document will be sent to all other members of the testing team. Like you could have test analysts, 3 to 4 test analysts, 5 to 6 test engineers. All these people will receive this test plan document. They can read through the document, they can understand the deadlines for each of them, they can understand what is their roles, what is that they have to do. They can get an overall understanding using this test plan document, which will be created by the test lead. Now we have understood 2 stages, guys: NFR gathering and analysis phase, and test strategy or test planning phase. Now we will move on to the 3rd stage, which is the test design and development. This is where lot of test analysts and test engineers will be involved. Okay, the bottom level of the chain, those are the people, they will be involved over here. Okay, this is where you create the test scripts. Okay, using whatever the tool that has been decided during the test planning phase. Let's say the load runner is the tool which has been decided by your test lead to be used by your project. Now during the test scripting or test design and development phase, you will take the tool called load runner and you will be start creating the test scripts. It could be 10, it could be 20, it could be 30. For the bigger projects, it could be even 40 scripts. Typically, this work will be distributed across multiple test analysts or multiple test engineers. So by the end of this phase, what you want to make sure, the test scripts are being created or executed at least once to make sure that there are no issues with the scripts. The scripts will be debugged, then they will be run with multiple times just to make sure that there are no issues with the scripts. Once the scripts has been created, this is when we can say that this particular phase or this particular stage is done. Now the 4th stage is the test execution phase. Now whatever the scripts that has been created in my earlier phase, which is the test design and development phase, all those scripts will be taken and will be executed during this phase. Again, who is involved? Again, the test analyst or test engineers who has created the scripts, they are the ones who will be executing the script. Again, as a test engineer, you need not have to worry, because if you face any issues during any of this phase, any issues, you can always go back to the test lead for guidance. Now during this phase, this is the phase wherein you will be executing all those types of tests that I have discussed in my earlier videos. Like you will be executing the load test, you will be executing the stress test, you will be executing the soak test or endurance test, volume test and scalability test in this phase. Always remember that the load test will be run with not one script but with all the scripts, with all those virtual users. That is the beauty of load testing. The load testing, you will not run the script one by one. Let's say you have total 10 scripts. You won't be running 10 scripts one after another. Like script 1, after script 1 is done, script 2, after script 2 is done, script 3. No, that's not how it is done. All these 10 scripts will be executed at once using that user load of 1000 or whatever it is. Once the load test is done, then they will go to the stress test. After that is done, then they go to the soak test and finally scalability and volume test. So once those 5 or 3 or 2, whatever is being decided during the test planning, you will run all those tests. Okay. Now, once the test is done, you have the test results. Typically in the test results, what you look at is the response times. Okay, what is RT? The response times. We have already understood what are those response times. So once the test is done, you look at the results. In the results, you pay attention to the response times. If the response times is less, which is less than the SLA, okay, then you finally create the analysis report and then you go out. But there is another chance as well. The response times are high, much higher than the SLA. Then there is something else you do. You do the analysis, you try to identify the bottleneck. What is a bottleneck? The issues which are causing the slowness. For whatever the reasons, the response times are high, or for whatever the reasons, the performance of the application is bad. Those issues we call them as bottlenecks. So you take the results, you do the analysis for those bottlenecks and you fix those bottlenecks. When I said you, not the performance engineer or the analyst or the lead. It will be the developer or performance engineers. It will be the developers or performance engineers who will be fixing those bottlenecks or who will be fixing those issues. Once the bottleneck is being taken away from the system, you have to do the test execution again. Again, you get the results. Now you look at the results again and you look at the response times again. This time around, let's say it's less than the SLA. Let's say the SLA is 2 seconds. This time around, let's say the response times are less than the SLA. Then you exit by creating the test report, or else you go back, do the analysis, identify the bottleneck, work with your developer to take away the bottleneck, and then you come back and do the execution again. So this loop continues until the bottleneck is taken away from your system. So once the bottleneck is taken away, then you create the final test report and then you exit it and your performance testing life cycle is done. This is when your project is done and the report will be checked by your client, and if he is happy, he will sign off, which means that you can close the project. So depending upon what you are a performance test engineer or a test analyst or a lead or a manager, you have work at each stage of the life cycle.